Hey guys, it's Andrew from Collective Intelligence, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Novation Launch Pad. This may be the first video that you've seen on the Launchpad, and may also be the first video you've seen of Ableton Live. So I'm going to approach this as though you're a beginner, and I'm going to show you how the Novation Launch Pad can be used inside of Ableton Live to improve your workflow, give you an instrument that you can play, and give you the ability to humanize things, so to speak, as we're producing pieces of our tracks. So let's have a look at it. This is the Novation Launchpad, and I'm going to talk you through the layout of it before we jump into Ableton and take a look at how it interacts with Ableton. So along the bottom here, we've got 8 pads, and up the top, we also have 8 pads, right? And these buttons that run across the top and then down the side are control buttons. So you won't be using these to play sounds, but they will be controlling Ableton to change the features around slightly. So if you think of a piano keyboard, we could imagine that this pad down here relates to the lowest note on a piano keyboard. And we move up 1, 2, 3, 4 pads. So 1, 2, 3, 4 keys on the keyboard. But then we transition over here, and we keep counting up, and we keep going up the piano keyboard all the way up to the top. Once we get to this note, we start again down at the bottom, and then we move all our way up to the very highest note. So when we're playing this as a piano or a synth, lowest note, highest note. When I'm using it as a drum machine or a sequencer, it's laid out slightly different. So when I'm playing drums, typically this bottom quarter is what all my drum pads will be mapped to. And then my sequence will be up the top, and then this could be something else that I could be controlling as well. So that's how these work, and we're going to be using them, examples of it, as we get into Ableton. But then there's also another way that it's used. So when we want to just trigger clips inside of Ableton, they're just pads that we activate rather than pads that we play like a piano. So we're just pressing to activate a clip, and it's going to play its sequence. So that's what these are. Along the top, we've got controls for navigating around the Ableton view. We've got buttons to change the way that we're seeing Ableton, or we're seeing how this is relating to Ableton. So the session view, note, custom. This captures MIDI, so this is going to capture information if we're playing stuff in or recording things. We've got volume, pan, send A, send B, stop, clip, mute, solo, and record down here. And I'll give you examples of all of them working. So that's the general layout of the Launchpad. What we'll do now is we'll jump into Ableton, and I'll start showing you why these lights are all lit up and how they relate to what's happening in the software. Okay, so here we are with Ableton open in front of us. So now we can see the Launchpad, and we can see the buttons that are lit up on the Launchpad relate to the different tracks that we've got here in Ableton. So in this case, you've got kick, bass, one shot, Atmos, crash, pads, sweeps, and effects, right? So they're the labels that I've come up with for all of the tracks or channels that we're using. And then inside these tracks, we've got Ableton clips, right? And in this case, I'm using them as audio clips. So what's inside of them? On the kick, we can see that inside of that clip is a kick drum. And that kick drum's on loop. It's going to keep playing around and around. And if I press on this drum pad, it's going to trigger it, and it's going to start playing. So let's go ahead and press that and play. Right? So we can see how it's playing through there, and it's looping back around. We can see that this is now activated with the green arrow. And we can also see that here we've got a green, it's changed to green, indicating that it's playing, right? Now I can stop that in a number of ways. Quickest way is just to press the empty clip. See, there's no clip in here, and it just stops, right? So these are all filled with clips, and you can see them relating to the pad here. So this is what Ableton calls the session view. So Ableton has two different ways of interacting with it. It's got the session view and it's got the arrangement view. The session is for what we're about to do. We're about to jam an idea out. And then the arrangement is where we would go to finalize and finish our track and get it ready to, export and send away to a mastering engineer or whatever we are doing to finish this track. So you can write an entire song inside the session view. You can write an entire song in the arrangement, or you can use a bit of both, whatever method works best for your workflow. So we've got the kick, we've got the bass, we got all of our different effects. And what I can do is I can play a sequence and I can give you an example of how it works. But before I do that, I need to explain to you something called quantization that I'm using here in Ableton. So you can see here this drop-down menu here, and it's giving me a whole bunch of different options. It's giving me bars, it's giving me like half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th, 32, right? So this is relating to Ableton's internal quantization. So if I keep this on 4 bars and I press play, you'll notice that the kick starts playing straight away. But if I wait and I press the bass now, you'll notice that it waited a little bit before it started playing. And I'll do it again with the up. It's waiting a short period of time. And what is happening is Ableton is always counting internally when I press play. I'm just going to stop those clips. When I press play up here, you'll notice that the time's counting up. And if I put the metronome on, Ableton's always counting. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I counted from 1 to 4 times, that's 4 bars of music. So if I activate the kick drum and then I activate the bass, you'll notice that it'll wait until the end of 4 bars to start playing. So this is a global quantization setting so that if I've got a clip playing or 2 clips playing, I cannot activate the next clip until the end of 4 bars of music. And this helps me because it keeps it perfectly in time. I can't play clips that are out of time. So we'll turn the metronome off. And what I did here to stop those clips is if I come down the side, I've got stop clip. If I select that, this red menu comes up. These 2 buttons are darker red than these ones, indicating that these 2 clips are playing. So if I press stop on both of them, it stops the clips. They go back to normal color. They're no longer green. And when I press play in Ableton, nothing's playing because I've got no clips activated, right? So what I'll do is I'll press the kick and the kick starts playing straight away because when I activate the kick, it starts the play button in Ableton and it starts the timer. So I'm going to give you an example of how I can play a little sequence. So I'll talk you through what I'm going to do and then I'm going to play it. So I'm going to activate the kick, bass, and then this long sweep all at the same time. And they're going to all start playing together. And as they're playing, I will then activate the ARP here, the atmosphere, and the crash. And then at the end of 4 bars, they will all play simultaneously. And you'll hear that we're starting to create somewhat of a little arrangement. So let's go ahead and deactivate that kick. So nothing's playing right now. I can press start. I can activate the first 3 clips that I want to play. Wait until the end of the 4-bar count. Now I'm going to activate the other 3, and then we're going to wait until the end of the 4-bar count. Right, and then I'll activate a zap just to play afterwards. And then I could play maybe another one of the ARPs. Great. So then I can stop the kick and bass. And that is us using the Novation Launchpad to trigger clips in the session view and play through ideas that we've brought into the clips, right? And the way that I was bringing these clips in, just to quickly let you know, is if I've got a sample folder and I've got a bunch of sequences or even one-shots, I can just click them, drag them, and drop them into clips, and then I can trigger them and play them. And that's how you get started, basically. So I did that, obviously, before we started the video. So I'll talk to you through how the volume and pan and send and everything else is working. And then we are going to start using the session view in collaboration with the arrangement view, and you'll get an idea of how these two interact with each other. So first of all, I'm going to show you how the volume works. So we'll click the volume, and you'll notice that everything changes to these green bars. And these are relating to the fader down here. So if I take the first track and I press the lowest one, you'll notice it's pulled the volume now all the way down to 0. Now we've put it back up to there. Now it's sort of like halfway, right? So this is a volume fader, and we've got that for each respective track that we can see on here. If I were to make a couple of more tracks, the way that I could get to them is by pressing the sideways arrow, right? And if I keep going, you'll notice that it's dark because there's no more channels that way, right? So that's how we do that. I'll just delete those 2 extra channels because we do not need them. And then the same goes for moving down as well. So if I go out of there, I can move down or move up, and you'll notice that this purple bar is moving in relation to what we can see on the particular drum pad at this point in time. So we've done volume, we'll go pan. So pan is laid out slightly different. So the kick is at the top, and we've got left or right and left, sorry, wrong way around. So if I press it all the way over here, you'll see the pan control pans it all the way to the left. If I press it here, it pans it all the way to the right. And then if I do somewhere in between, it relates to that, right? Cool. So if I put it back in the middle, I'll give you an example of the next channel, right? So they all work exactly the same, and they're all colored to relate to the particular track that we're trying to interact with. Moving along, we've got the sends. And what I'll do is I'll start playing the kick, and we're going to send it to this reverb, right? So now it's got reverb on it. We'll come over to send B. Now it's got delay on it, right? So to set that back to 0, that's how we can do sends, and obviously the channels relate exactly the same as how they do when we're in the other views. Here we've got stop clip, right? We've covered that briefly. Press stop, wait to the end of the 4-bar count, it stops. If I trigger both the kick and bass again, I come over to the menu system. I can mute a particular channel. So I can mute both of them. Then if I deactivate that, come to solo. I can solo one or the other, or I can, if I'm quick enough, I can press them both at the same time, and I can solo more than one channel, which it's not really solo anymore, but you get it. Cool. And then right down the bottom, we've got the record arm, so we can start recording stuff into Ableton. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to go ahead and we're going to record things. So I'm just going to press stop up here, and I'm going to play that little sequence that I did again. And then we're going to jump over into the other view, and we're going to look at what we've done. So I'll make sure that these clips are not playing. I'm going to press play, and then I'm going to activate the record button up the top, and I will press all of the controls. So the kick, bass, and the pad, or sweep, sorry. Trigger them all to play at the same time. And then I'll trigger the other 3 pads to play. And then I'll activate that little zap to play afterwards. I'll come over to the stop clip. I'm going to wait for the pad to finish playing. And I'm going to press stop on both the kick and bass. So now we've played through our little sequence. We can press stop up the top of Ableton. And now I'm going to move over to what we call the arrangement view. So if I press tab on my keyboard, I change from the session, which is looking at all the tracks vertically. We go to the arrangement, which is now going to look at the tracks horizontally. And you can see that, first of all, everything's grayed out. We need to deactivate that. So if we come over here and we press that red button, it activates the arrangement view. So now you can see I've got the kick recorded out, and I can now move my cursor to the beginning of the 9th bar, which is just here, and I can press spacebar on my keyboard, and you're going to hear that I'm playing through the exact same sequence that we played. Right? So this is where we could start making finer adjustments to our arrangement. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these channels, hold shift to select them all. I'm just going to drop them all down. So we're going to move to the next part of the tutorial, which will be looking at how we use this playing keys or how we use it playing drums. So I'm going to right click and insert a MIDI channel. I'm going to come over to the drum kit here and I'm going to navigate to an interesting sounding drum kit. I quite like this. It's not conventional sort of sounds. I'm going to drag and drop it here. You may not have these exact same sounds. Don't panic, just use whatever drum kit you have available. So now that I've dragged that in there, I just need to make sure that I've got this selected as red. So when I press buttons on here, it knows that it's going to that channel to trigger this drum rack. Now if I press on note on the top menu, now you can see that we are looking at just these 16 drum pads. Right, so I can play all of these sounds. And if I was really good at playing drum patterns, I could go ahead and press play here, and I could play something in time with it, right? But I'm not very good at playing stuff in time. But you could imagine how we could go ahead again and press record, and I could try and play in time with the track and make some sort of little hi-hat sequence. So this allows me to improvise. So if I had like a kick pattern for a dubstep track or something like this, I could put the snare on one of these pads, and then I could play the snare and I could play it in a very human kind of way. And what I mean by human is that if you sequence it inside of MIDI, everything is perfectly and rigidly in time. So a human drummer will never play like that. They'll always play minor little inconsistencies, and that gives the drums a feeling. So this is a really great way to humanize your music. So that's how we would use it with a drum rack in mind. I can go ahead and make a new MIDI track, and I could go to an instrument and I could just pick any old instrument. So let's go bass. Where's that hip hop bass? I really like that hip hop bass. Hip hop sub bass. Drag it and drop it over here. And now you'll see it looks completely different again. And if I press, so again, we're going up like notes on a keyboard. Highest note, lowest note, right? These two. So we are able then to obviously press play again. And if this fit the style of music, we could play our bass notes in a way that would make sense. And we can sort of improvise over the top of what we've got arranged. So that's a really cool way. We can also use the session view and we can record clips in of what we're playing as well. So we can do it in both ways. I just thought this was a great way to transition over to the other sequence and then show the other way that the controller is used. So it's quite straightforward to use it as an instrument controller or a drum rack controller. Now, I wanted to show you a couple of other ways that it can be used that make it quite interesting. So just quickly, we'll go ahead and we'll change that sub bass to, right, we're playing something bit more interesting. And then we can come over to the MIDI effects and we can grab the, scale and we can drop the scale on there and we can make sure that every note that we play is in the scale. Right, so we can play whatever note on here we want, and it makes sense. Sweet, sounds perfect. So that's another cool way of doing it. You could do this as well, grab an arpeggiator. Right, I could put an arpeggiator on a couple steps and I could hold multiple keys. And it's a really cool way of getting interesting sequences playing, right? So that's really all the features that I did want to cover. So that is your first look at the Novation Launchpad. Hopefully that gives you an idea of the creative potential for this instrument in collaboration with Ableton. If you like the video, go ahead and like it, share it with some friends, subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video.